Can you completely disinherit your spouse? So a lot of times we'll get a call and they'll say, hey, listen, can I maybe keep some things away from my wife, away from my husband? And it might not be for bad things, right? It might not be because you just, don't like them and you don't want them to get anything, but maybe it's because you have, kids from a previous marriage, they have kids from a previous marriage, and you all have some sort of agreement that basically says, everything you have goes to your kids, everything they have goes to their kids. And so you're just trying to find a way, hey, when I die, I want to make sure that everything goes to my kids instead of, my spouse and their kids. And there are things that you can do, but it is very state specific. And most of the time, I'm going to recommend that hopefully before you got married, maybe you did what's called a prenuptial agreement, or after you got married, now that you're starting to think about these things, maybe you go back and do a postnuptial agreement, which is done after you've been married. And again, which says, hey, what's mine is mine, or what's theirs is theirs, or you have some sort of agreement about who gets what. That doesn't work all the time because a lot of times, we find some people are just uncomfortable doing a prenuptial or uncomfortable doing a postnuptial agreement for a variety of reasons. So they might not want to do that. So now they want to make sure when we do the planning, or when their estate planning attorney does the planning, that things are divided the way they want to do it. Again, state specific. There are certain laws, depending on where you live, that will allow you to leave some things, not leave some things to your spouse, but sometimes, especially one of the things that comes to mind is what's called the homestead property in certain states, like here where I practice in Florida. You can't always completely disinherit a spouse, or it's at least kind of difficult to do so. So there are things that we can put into this is where you're going to need a trust. There are certain things that we can put into a trust to make sure that it goes to the individuals you want it to go to, and maybe not just your spouse. But it's not as simple as, hey, I want to leave everything to my kids and nothing to my spouse, especially if they're not on board with that. That just tees up a lot of potential fighting after you pass away. The spouse is going to have rights to a significant part of your estate, whether or not you put it into a will or put it into a trust or not. So if that's a conversation that you're having, and your spouse is on board with it, or frankly, even if they're not on board with it, definitely don't try to do it yourself, because we see all the time where someone has tried to do that and it just didn't work out. And so now there's a bunch of litigation because the spouse is taken off guard, didn't know that they were being left out. The kids are upset because they thought everything was coming to them. So definitely talk to your estate planning attorney. There are ways to completely or somewhat, leave your spouse out of receiving any sort of inheritance, but it's a complicated matter.